We are going to hear about how Martin Lockett ended up spending 17.5 years in prison for a fatal DUI, and then we're going to hear about how he turned it all around. But before we bring him in, here's a sneak peek.
I drank and drove New Year's Eve of 2003 and killed two people, severely injured another. And 3 days later, I'm in my cell and I get a newspaper underneath my door and I start to read this article. And for the first time in days, my faceless victims became people. And these people had a story. They were recovering addicts who had turned their lives around and were now helping other people get clean and sober. And at the end of that article, that columnist has said, quote, perhaps the person they will have ended up helping the most is the man who's charged with killing them. End quote.
What's up, Martin? How are you?
Doing pretty good tonight. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, man. I'm feeling the vibe tonight. I know we're going to be talking about some heavy things, but it's feeling good, man. It's feeling good. Is there anything that you'd like to say before we jump in tonight?
Man, I'm just super, super honored to be here. And anybody who's listening tonight, I really hope that you hear something that resonates. I think no matter what background we come from, where we are in our recovery or sober, curious journey or whatever the case may be, I think just that thread of struggle and pain is something that that all humans can connect to. And so hopefully people do feel that in my story tonight.
Awesome. Okay, well, let's dive in.
This is Hard Knox Talks.
All right. Tonight's live production is brought to you in part by Prairie Harm Reduction, emphasizing local action with national impact, Prairie Sky Recovery Center, Healing Happens Here, and Stronger Together Canada, peer-led support groups by Mums Stop the Harm. To learn more about all our sponsors, check out www.hardknockstalks.com. While you're there, check out our fresh summer 2023 merch. Help us out. I'd love to see some of them walking around. All right, we got the plug in. So, Martin, we learned a little bit about you in the intro there. Some very tragic happenings on your journey. But before we get into that, why don't you tell us how this all got started? Like, was there a lot of drinking and stuff going on at home growing up?
Yeah. So actually, no, I was quite the black sheep. So I grew up in Portland, Oregon in the 80s. And anybody who is familiar with Portland, Oregon or heard about it, today it's the whole keep Portland weird mantra. You got naked bike rides and, just a, very liberal state, right?
Mm-hmm.
Much different vibe in the 80s. It was a war zone. There were gangs coming up from California fighting for territory. It was the height of the crack epidemic. So there were, drive-by shootings and murders and prostitution. And it was a cesspool.
So you were
fortunately,
around this? Like this was like
I was around
life?
this.
Okay.
I absolutely grew up right in this war zone, but I was sheltered by the love and nurturing of two wonderful, awesome parents. Right.
Okay.
And so, my dad, I have a twin brother and two older sisters. And so my dad, he would take my brother and me to, Little League and Cub Scouts and chop down Christmas trees and things like that. And so it was a very average, normal childhood. And I was terribly shy, right? I was terribly shy. And so when I got to high school, things, as it does for a lot of kids, they go a different direction. And so I needed to fit in and be connected with the cool crowd. And so I remember the first time I was at a party with 15, 16, 17-year-olds, and this guy hands my brother and me a beer. And I remember we looked at each other and we're thinking, like, there's no way we can drink this beer because mom and dad would absolutely kill us. We were not raised this way. I took a few swigs off of that disgusting liquid. And all I remember was my chest heated up and all my inhibitions came down. And I could finally freely talk to girls without stumbling over my words. And, it was just an air of confidence and just, being carefree. And so that was my infatuation with alcohol. It was a social lubricant. And it stayed that way for a couple of years. And then things turned pretty dark after that.
So did it become like, did it take precedence in your life right away?
It didn't right away because I was still in school. I was still doing okay and things like that. But it slowly, I would say in a matter of months, it was something I pretty much started to rely on a daily basis. And then it
Oh,
led
wow.
to skipping a class here and there. And
Mm-hmm.
then, skipping a full day, right?
Mm-hmm.
And having excuses as to why I wasn't in class. And so I had to compound lies to my parents to get through this. And that's when I knew that the alcohol is really starting to, kind of get out of control here.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm 15 and 16 years old. So, like, I don't really know what alcoholism is or dependence or anything like that. I just know I'm having a good time and I'm accepted amongst my peer group and life is not so bad. At
Did your
six,
parents catch on right away? Like, when did they start to notice?
they noticed when my brother and I started to go to jail for riding around in stolen cars and hanging around with guys we should not have
Oh,
been hanging around with. These were
shit got
not guys
heavy.
who were welcome to the house, right? We would hang out with them at school.
Okay.
So yeah, that was when
Yeah.
things got a little bad. My parents, however, so my dad would work all day, and my mom's health started to deteriorate. So she couldn't rein in two 15, 16-year-old boys who were running the streets. Her
Mm-hmm.
health just wouldn't allow it, and she was going through issues with my dad and things like that. So, my brother and I pretty much did what we wanted to do. And this led to going to jail and getting put on probation and, around 16 years of age is when I knew that I really had an issue with alcohol. It was really, you know, becoming my life. Because at this point now I'm looking at my life and I'm looking at everybody around me, and I'm in the hood, right? And so nobody around me is driving a Mercedes, working, at a high rise building downtown, wearing a suit to work. That's not people from my neighborhood. And so for me, it was like I wanted to go beyond where I had come from, but I really didn't believe that I could. No matter how hard I worked or how well I did in school or anything like that, it just felt like that was not in the cards for me because there was no examples around me that manifested that. So
Mm-hmm.
then I sunk into a depression because I'm thinking my life is like this. This is all my life is ever going to be, and so I didn't have any coping mechanisms on how to talk about that and how to cope with that. And so the alcohol was just my coping mechanism, as
So,
it is for a lot of people who don't know how to process pain.
did you know about like meetings, for example, like AA? Like, was the thought of seeing a therapist at school a thing for you?
So sadly, that was never a thing in my household. That was never a thing in my community. And frankly,
Mm-hmm.
that is still a big problem in the Black community, if I'm being honest with you. Because we're told, a lot of us, we are told that whatever happens like in this household, it doesn't go beyond this household. If you
Mm-hmm.
have issues with yourself, then you don't need to go talk to a therapist about it or, a counselor or a mentor or anything like go to a meeting or anything like that. Like, just deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
For a 15 or 16 or 17-year-old with no coping mechanism, just deal
Yeah.
with it.
Well, and that stands out to me that even at like 15 and 16 years old, you started to recognize this as something that you would like to change in your life. Like that wasn't the case for me until I was 36 and everything was burnt down and smoking around me. So that's incredible.
Well, yeah, I did want to change it, but I frankly didn't feel that there was any avenue to do that, and so I just wanted to numb the pain, right?
Mm-hmm.
As we do, and so that persisted until, well, leading into the reason why I'm here today.
Yeah.
So let me back up a little bit and say that even when I was 21, 22, 23 years of age, I didn't graduate high school, but I got my GED, right? And then I went to community college and I enrolled in classes to become a nurse. I wanted to become a nurse. I
Mm-hmm.
felt like that would give me good job security and things
Hang
like
on a
that.
minute.
I
Hang on.
worked.
Hang on. Whoa, hang on a second here now. So you're running the streets, you're going to jail, you're was riding in stolen cars, and all of a sudden you're like, I want to be a nurse.
Not all of a sudden.
Okay.
No.
Okay.
So there was actually a period in there where I did go to prison at 19 years of age,
Mm-hmm.
and I got out 3 years later when I was 22. And I had gone to prison. 5 of my buddies and I had gone to prison with sentences that ranged from 5 to 31.5 years. So
Holy.
I got a 5.5 year sentence for my part in an armed robbery that I conspired to commit with them. I
Uh-huh.
didn't physically go in and rob anybody, but I drew out the blueprint of the restaurant that I worked at the time. And I showed them where the safe was going to be. And I told them how many employees would be there and all of that. And so they went in, did the deed, got caught later after a string of robberies. And then there was a murder involved as well, hence the guy who got 31 and a half years.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so I went to prison at 19 years of age. My family was crushed. They were devastated. I wasn't raised like this. They stuck
Mm-hmm.
by my side, supported me, encouraged me to
Wow.
get my GED, and I want to make them proud. You know, it's my family. I love my family.
Yeah.
So I do all that. I turn over a new leaf. I start going to church. I'm going to meetings now when I get out, right?
Yeah.
Um, I get a job at a warehouse. I save up money. I buy my first car. You know, I meet a woman. I move out to Vancouver, Washington, to live with her. Life was going pretty good on the
Mm-hmm.
outside,
Mm-hmm.
but I never really dealt with the underlying issues of insecurity and poor self-concept and poor self-esteem. I never really dealt with those things. So they came back. They came back to haunt me, and that's when I began to allow myself to uh, drink a little bit,
Mm-hmm.
was turned into a lot of it, and I was off to the races, drinking and driving every single day, and
So
deluding
I,
myself.
I have a
Yeah.
question before we go any further here. When you said you were going to meetings and stuff like that, was there any buy-in? Like, were you like, did you get the sponsor? Did you do the steps, or were you just like going through the mechanics, showing up and?
It was more of going through the mechanics. I mean, there were parts in there that I really did latch on to, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I just didn't feel that it was in the cards for me. Like I admired guys who said that they had 15 years clean and
Yeah.
one day at a time, and I'm like, man, that's great. Like that's awesome. But like, is that for me? Because these guys, they don't live in my shoes. They don't know what it feels like to be black
Mm-hmm.
in America and to not have opportunities that other people would have and things like that. And so that was the narrative of my life. That
Mm-hmm.
woe is me because I'm poor and I'm black and I'm from the hood and my parents aren't lawyers and doctors, right? And so
Yeah.
I live by that script.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and then you started drinking again. Now, when you picked up the bottle, was there like, I shouldn't be doing this, or were you like, hello, old friend?
There was absolutely that first, you know, kind of stopgap that said,
Reluctance.
"Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
What are you doing?" But then once I did it, and that old feeling, I mean, it was like I'd never stopped drinking. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
it had been like almost 3.5, 4 years, and it was like I had never stopped drinking, and my chest heated up, and that relaxation came over me, and it was like, man, but then this time I'm thinking, well, I'm gonna do it differently,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I got a job and I live, I don't live at home with mom and I'm paying all my bills and, I'm going to school. And so if I just do this long enough, eventually I'm not going to need alcohol to get me by because I'm going to have a good job and I'm going to make money and I'm going to feel good about myself and everything's going to work out. Is what I
Mm-hmm.
was telling myself. Right. But I
Mm-hmm.
later learned that my addicted brain is going to tell me anything it needs to tell me to keep it, to keep it going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how fast did it get out of control?
Um, Quickly, within a matter of a couple months, I was
Mm-hmm.
drinking every day.
Mm-hmm.
I would get off of work at 3:30 and I would go straight to the store and I'd buy 4 24-ounce cans of beer and I would go home and drink all four of those.
What
And then I would
the
start drinking hard liquor
what
well
the
into
part
the evening.
what did your partner say? Because you said you mentioned that you got a girlfriend, right? So
Yes.
did she know about your past? Like, did she know that you'd had struggles?
She didn't know to the extent. No,
Okay.
she didn't know to the extent. And so, but she did get worried. And I'll tell you, leading up into the night of the crash, like 3 or 4 months prior, she kept telling me, Martin, you cannot keep drinking and driving like this. You're going to kill somebody. You're going to kill yourself. Something bad is going to happen. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, it goes through one ear and out the other because I'm thinking, well, I've been doing it for the last year
Mm-hmm.
anyway, and I haven't, nothing bad has happened so far. So, like, what do you know?
Yeah.
Right? What do you know?
And I've been there too,
And
man. Like I can relate to that. You know, when I was younger and I was in it, if I don't drink and drive, how am I going to get home from the bar? You know, and then I'm all justified and off the road, down the road I go. Now, if, luck of the draw, nothing really terrible ever happened. But I did get it. I did get it suspended license a couple times.
Yeah.
So,
You know, I
yeah.
wish I had gotten a suspended. I wish I had gotten a DUI. I think about this not often, but from time to time.
Hmm.
I wish I would have gotten a DUI because I wonder if that would have been enough to stop me and wake me up and shake me really hard, right? And make me see how serious this is. I don't know, right?
Yeah.
I'll never know, obviously.
Yeah.
But so this, takes us into the night of New Year's Eve of 2003. It was
Hmm.
like any normal day. I kissed her goodbye. I went to work at 7 a.m. We got off work early because of the holiday, so it's about 11:30. We're wrapping things up, and I remember I went straight to the liquor store where I bought a fifth of gin, and then I went to my parents' house to hang out with my twin brother because that's where he was living at the time. So I get to my parents' house and I'm hanging out with him and I'm drinking the alcohol over the course of 3 or 4 hours. And then we made plans to attend a house party that night, a guy we had gone to high school with. And then after I drank that entire fifth of gin by myself, I then went back to the store where I bought, again, as customary, 4 24-ounce cans of beer. I did it every single day like clockwork. Drank those over the next few hours. And then my brother and I decided we would go to another friend's house in the meantime to hang out because we didn't want to get to the party too early. So we
Hmm.
get to that friend's house and the three of us hang out and we drink another pint of hard liquor between us. It's now about 11 o'clock. So we go to exit his apartment, and from the kitchen, his mother yells out, now y'all be careful tonight. You hear? And of
Hmm.
course, we all said, yes, ma'am, yes, ma'am. We'll be careful. Obviously, we had no intentions of being careful that night. So we get to the party and we see a bunch of old classmates, and we drink more alcohol, of course, and we celebrate, bring in the new year. Everything is great. We exit the party at about 12:15 a.m. Three of us get into my vehicle. And here's the thing. So a lot of people, they said, well, how come your brother or your friend didn't try to take your keys? You've been drinking all day, right? Sadly, this is what all of us did
Hmm.
every single day.
Yeah.
None of us ever thought twice about it, right? It was just par for the course.
Yeah.
So I take my friend home, no problem. Get back onto the freeway. And at this point, I'm just feeling so exhausted because I've been drinking all day and I only had eaten one meal at about 4:30 that afternoon. So I begin to pick up my speed to about 80 miles an hour. And my
Hmm.
brother gets a little nervous and he says, hey, man, you should slow down. The police are out, it being a holiday and all. And I thought for 1.5 seconds, well, that makes sense, right? So I slowed down. And we exit the freeway about 10 minutes later. And we're driving now in a residential area. And again, I begin to pick up my speed now to about 60 miles an hour. And this time, my brother, he starts to yell at me, slow down before we crash. And I tell him, calm down. I know what I'm doing. I've got this. I've done it 100 times. But just, to appease him, keep him quiet, I went ahead and slowed down. So we drive for a few more blocks. And then I'm just about to get into the left-hand turning lane to drop him off at our parents' house. And then he suddenly realizes he's all out of cigarettes. So he
Mm.
said, hey, man, let's go up the road so I can get some cigarettes. I'm all out. And in my mind, I'm thinking, great,
Now you're
here's one
mad,
more
right?
stop. I'm mad because I don't want to have to make another stop.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we drive for a couple blocks. And 2 blocks from that point, there's an intersection. And I'm looking up at the light, and the light is yellow. And I knew, as intoxicated as I was, there was no way I was going to make this light.
Hmm.
But it didn't matter because I just wasn't going to wait for the stupid light. I'm going to get these cigarettes and go home. So I immediately punched the gas, and I remember I became tunnel vision where I don't see anything to the right or left of me. And within seconds, boom. I mean, just this earth-shattering crash. And I remember the airbag envelops my face, and it feels like I'm being suffocated by a parachute.
So you remember
My car
this?
come. I remember it vividly like it was yesterday, man. Like it was yesterday. My car comes to a slow winding halt. I immediately look to my right to see if my brother's okay and he's starting to move a little bit, so I'm relieved they were both alive.
Hmm.
Simultaneously, a guy comes rushing up to the driver's side door frantically. Are you guys okay? Are you guys okay? Yeah, we're okay, I tell him. And I step out of my vehicle and I remember my first instinct, and I hate that I even say this today, all these years later, but I didn't go check on the people I had just hit because my number one concern was my vehicle because it was my status symbol of success, right? I'm still dealing with this insecurity and needing to feel important and needing to feel validated and that I'm somebody in society. So
Hmm.
I'm walking around my vehicle and it's just totally destroyed. The entire front end is smashed inward. My custom rims are mangled beyond repair, and I'm crushed because I'm now looking at my, everything that meant something to me and that gave me value was in a heap of crumpled metal.
Mm-hmm.
And then my brother gets my attention and he starts to point across the street where the car had spun about 70 feet before it stopped. And he said, "Hey, man," he said, "I think I see somebody lying down on the pavement over there. And it doesn't look like they're moving." So instantly, of course, it starts to, resonate, the magnitude and severity of what I had just done. But, there's no time to process anything because the lights and sirens are just rushing to the scene. And so the policemen are there. And they take my brother a few feet away to talk to him, and they're interviewing me. And the first responders are trying to get the people out the vehicle to see if they can save any lives.
Mm-hmm.
And about 3 minutes into that interview, that officer confirmed to me what I had already in my heart of hearts known to be true, which was that person who was lying on the pavement had perished. And he told me that another person was being driven to the trauma center just blocks away by ambulance. And so I'm placed under arrest and I'm put into the back of the police cruiser, and we head for downtown for processing. And from the back seat, I'm listening to the police radio because there's a lot of chatter about the crash, as you can imagine. And about 10 minutes into that ride, I could hear it come over the police radio that, unbeknownst to me, there was another passenger who had been pronounced dead at the scene. So there was one survivor. And in the state of Oregon, I am keenly aware that DUI manslaughter is considered a violent person-to-person crime, which requires absolutely no ifs, ands, or buts about it, requires a mandatory minimum 10-year sentence day for day. And I've got 2 of them. So I know as the police car drives past my parents' house and I take one last look down that street, I know I'm not going to see that street for about 20 years.
What was going through your head? And like, I'm interested to know if you remember the moment that the officer broke that news to you that the one had perished.
Well, I saw my life. And I'll say, like, I don't want to say, please understand, I'm not considering my life to be greater or more important than the lives that I took, obviously, right?
Yeah.
These people were innocent, going about their business, and I'll tell you more about their lives as we go on. But in that moment, I'm 24 years old, and I'd already spent 3 years in prison, and that was hell, right?
Mm-hmm.
3 years in prison seemed like 30 years in prison.
Mm-hmm.
And now I know without a doubt I'm going to go. When he tells me that, like, I'm shocked, but I'm more devastated for what that would mean for my own life, if I'm being honest with you.
Yeah.
If I'm being honest with you. Yeah.
Yeah, I get it, man. Like that is a fundamental shift in I can't even imagine, like it would be very hard pressed for me to think that I might not also feel the same way in a similar situation, being a family man. I mean, you have a job, a career, you have all of these things, and life was seemingly good to you, and now it's just like snap and it's over.
And literally a 3.5 second decision, not even 3.5 seconds it took for me to make that decision to go through that light, man.
Yeah.
To go through that light. And and that's why when I speak out today and I tell people, like, don't let a 10-second decision get you 10 years in prison.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Don't let that happen. Don't end up like me. And so in that moment, that's what I'm processing, right? But I'm still very much intoxicated. And so, I mean, I know the gravity of what I had just done, but obviously it doesn't fully sink in until, the coming days and weeks and months. And you're talking to your attorney and you're having meetings with the prosecutor and the judge. And like, that's when it really gets real, because I'm still thinking for the next several months, and I want to back up and explain the pivotal moment in this whole story. But even as we're having like settlement conferences, and my dad hired a lawyer, even though he couldn't afford one, he, pieced together $10,000 with some family members and hired an attorney to give me a decent shot. I would have been jumping for joy if I would have gotten a 10-year sentence out of this.
Yeah.
Jumping for joy. You know what I mean? Day for day.
Yeah.
And when they started telling me, as we were having settlement conferences, the judge is like, I can tell you the state is not going to go under 14 years for something like this. And you would be lucky to get 14 years. And in that moment, at 24 years old, I'm thinking I'm going to be 38 at minimum. I'm going to be 38 when I get out of prison.
Yeah.
Like, I'm 24. What does a 38-year-old Martin look like? What does he do? What does he believe in? Where does he live? Like,
Yeah.
I can't fathom.
I mean, that's kind of almost like an incomprehensible amount of time. You know, like we can say it and you can have a basic understanding of how long that is, but like to every single day, you know, for a 14 or whatever year sentence, I mean, that is something, man. Like, holy cow.
Yeah, and they don't sentence you in years. They sentence you in months. So when they start talking 175 months and 188 months and 200, like I end up getting 210 months, right?
Mm-hmm.
Day for day.
Yeah.
17 and a half years, day for day. I couldn't earn a single day off for good behavior, for getting an education. Like none of that mattered. If I could have gotten into a fight every day and it wouldn't have changed when I was going to get out of prison.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, let's take a quick break. We're going to hear a couple of words from the University of Saskatchewan. We'll be right back. The School of Public Health at the University of Saskatchewan is now offering a graduate certificate in substance use health and well-being. This is a one-year program that is open to professionals who wish to deepen their overall understanding of substance use. You do not need a prior degree for admittance. On completion of this program, you will take away a developed health intervention to reduce the harms of substance use as they relate to your vocation. To learn more about this program and the application process, go to the link in the show notes. And Martin is not there. Huh. And he's back.
I apologize.
You scared the shit out of me, my friend.
I apologize. No, I tried to get rid of a banner, and it did something I didn't expect it to do.
Yeah, no, it's all good. Pull your camera just a little bit forward.
Okay.
Just a little bit.
Or
there you go.
Am I there?
Yeah,
am I
think
there
so.
or no?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay.
So, now you're in prison. Tell us a little bit about the first few days in prison. What was that like to adjust?
Yeah, so I'm in jail. I wish I would have been in prison because prison is much easier than jail, than county jail, to be honest with you. County jail is the absolute worst. Like, I see why guys take plea bargains because they just want to get out of county jail and go to state prison where everything is better, right? The food, the yard time, the living conditions, everything is better. But so I'm in the county jail, and 3 days later, as I said in the intro, I get somebody slides the Oregonian, the statewide newspaper. They slide it underneath my door, and I read this article, and I see my picture, and I read this article, and it's detailing the lives of my victims, and that was when I was able to put faces and stories to names, and I learned that these people, they had like 16 and 17 years in recovery at the time. They were volunteers for Volunteers of America. They would watch women's kids so that they could attend AA and NA meetings. They were heavily involved in the recovery community in Portland. They were coming home from a clean and sober New Year's Eve party that night when they were struck and killed by a drunk driver.
Wow.
And so the columnist, that's when he talked about, he called it a palpable irony that these people who had devoted their entire lives to helping people get clean and sober would have their lives cut short by a drunk driver. And then he said at the end, like I said, he said, quote, perhaps the person they will have ended up helping the most is the man who's charged with killing them. And it was such a heavy statement, right? I didn't know how to process it. I'm 24 years old. I know I'm going to prison for about 20 years. So I couldn't appreciate how this situation was going to help me and how, this was going to actually, be a positive in my life. But I also knew what he said I couldn't ignore because it was so profound. So I knew the only thing I knew how to do was to pray about it, right? So I literally spent the next 6 or 7 months praying about this phrase and how it was supposed to apply to my life. And,
Were you a religious person before this? I mean, you haven't really mentioned much about it.
We had grown up in the church. And so when I was in prison the first time, my parents had encouraged me to start going to church, start reading my Bible again, get back to my roots, so to speak. And I did that. And when I got out of prison the first time, I continued to go to church and things like that until I started hanging around my buddies who were going to clubs every weekend and drinking and partying and things like that. And then I slowly, slipped back into that. So it was always kind of in me, even though I wasn't living it. But as a lot of guys, they go to prison and they're no longer hanging out with their buddies and drinking and smoking. Then they kind of get back to those roots.
Yeah.
And so that's, I felt at that point, there's nobody or nothing that's going to help me. So like, why not God, right? Why not something greater than myself? Like, I'm like, this is desperation. It's desperation time.
Was it a foxhole prayer? Like, were you like, get me out of this and I'll never do it again? Or was there some like soul behind it? Like you genuinely wanted to change?
It started off as that, honestly. But once I knew, like, I had come to a point where I had accepted that I was going to be in prison for at least 10 years. That no matter how, no matter what miracle that was going to happen, it wasn't going to totally get me out of this. It would have been a miracle to get 10 years, frankly. And I would have considered that an utter miracle, right? So I knew I was going to go to prison for a long time. And it was absolutely imperative because, like, I'm going to tell you, I don't say this when I do my interviews because some people might think, oh, yeah, right, that's not. But I'm going to tell you what happened the night that this happened. They take me to the drunk tank. And the officers, before they put me in there, say, hey, you know what you just done tonight, right? And I'm like, kind of in it out, out of it a little bit. I'm like, yeah, I know I killed 2 people, and they're like, yeah, this is serious. You're gonna go to prison for a really long time, and they're kind of giving it to me. They put me in this drunk tank by myself to sober up, and I'm telling you, I'm in that drunk tank, man, and I knew I was going to prison for a really long time, but it was such a relief.
Yeah, man.
I felt this wave of relief and comfort come over me because I'm like, it is finally over. Like, I don't have to be a slave to alcohol anymore. Granted, I didn't want it to happen this way, but I knew like it was done. Like it was done, that I was never going to touch alcohol again.
Yeah.
And
I've heard that before, and I've experienced it to a certain extent myself. Like when I came into recovery, my house just about went into foreclosure, and it sold for a very, very low price. And I was holding on to that. It was my home, right? That's my home. And the second I like just passed the keys over, like it was like a weight. Like I was expecting to be devastated, right? But a weight just came off, like a new beginning, like. Whew. So, and I've heard other people that get incarcerated for different reasons say the same thing. They're just like, thank God it's over.
Seriously, man. And like, obviously I hate and will forever regret the fact that 2 beautiful, innocent lives had to be taken for me to finally, get to where I am, where I don't need alcohol and I don't rely on alcohol and things like that. Like, I wish it could have happened any other way. Honestly. But it didn't. And I have to accept that, and that was the whole process of learning to forgive myself and getting over that guilt and shame and things like that. But so I have this sense of relief, but now I still have to grapple with the fact I'm going to go to prison for a really long time. And so when I prayed about this phrase and how I was supposed to apply this to my life, it finally came to me, about 6 or 7 months later, and it finally dawns on me that the only way this tragedy will not be in vain and remain a simple tragedy is if I carry on these people's legacies and do everything I can to help people who are struggling in addiction and to prevent them from ever following in my footsteps. And so in that cell that day, that's what I committed to do. Now, I had no idea how that was going to manifest. I had no idea what shape that was going to take. I didn't even know how long I was going to be in prison. I just knew it was going to be a really long time. But I knew that I was committed to the cause, and that's all I had in that moment.
So how long did it take for you to start to see options become available as far as how you could be of service?
So a few months later, I took the plea bargain for 17 and a half years to avoid going to trial and all of that. So I get to state prison, and in my mind, I'm thinking, well, if I'm going to help people who are struggling in addiction, I probably should become a counselor. That's the easiest path to do that, right? Well, I have to get an education to do that. And they don't have federal monies coming in to help prisoners, get education. So you're gonna any education you're gonna get, you got to pay for it yourself. I didn't have any money,
Yeah.
so they were offering one college course from the local community college for $25 at the time. You can take one class per term, $25, because it was
Hell of a
these little
deal.
old ladies who had started this foundation to raise money to help prisoners go to school. Right? What an awesome thing!
Amazing.
So I take these classes, one per term, and I think, well, I don't know how this works. If I take enough classes, they'll give me a degree at some point, I guess. I don't really know how this works, but I'll do it. So I did that for like the first 3 years. And then
Mhm.
3 years into my sentence, I lose my dad. Very unexpected.
Sorry.
But in that happening, I was able to get like his pension and life insurance policies and things like that. So now I'm able to actually afford to take classes from major universities outside of the prison. So I started taking classes from Louisiana State University and Indiana University, and I parlayed all of that into an associate's degree in 2010, and then I went on to get a bachelor's in sociology from Colorado State University in 2013, and then I went on to get a master's in psychology from California Coast University in 2016. And so as
Mhm.
I'm taking all these psychology and sociology courses, I'm starting to really like kind of peel back the layers of the origins of my addiction and where it all started for me, and
Mhm.
why I struggled with my self-esteem, and why I had a poor self-concept, and why I was so dependent on people's approval and validation of me, right?
Mhm.
Where all of that came from, and then why
So
I needed alcohol to deal with that.
So this started be like you went into this educations with the pretense that you were going to use this education to help others, and it sounds to me like now it sent you down a path of self-realization. Would that be accurate?
No question,
Yeah.
100%. And it's starting to make sense to me as to where I went wrong. But then I'm now using that to like start to mentor young guys who are coming into the system, being
Mhm.
recruited to gangs and stuff like that. And they would see how I was doing my time. They saw that I stayed out of trouble. They saw I was going to school. They saw I was tutoring guys in the GED program. And they respected that because it was different. And so these guys, I'd be like walking the track or working out or whatever, and they would come over to me and they would say, "Hey man, I see how you do your time, man," and stuff like that. And so they say, "Man, I want to talk to you about something." And they start to they give me a little bit of their personal life to see if they can trust me with it, right? And once they see they
Mm.
can, man,
Mhm.
I had guys walking around the track for 3 hours with me talking about childhood trauma, being sexually molested, domestic violence in the home, growing up, being homeless with their mom and three other siblings, for like just stuff you just don't talk about in prison, right? You
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
don't.
Was that weird for
But they
you? Because I
trusted
mean,
me.
you grew up in a home where it was like you don't talk to the outside about this stuff. So was that hard for you the first time people started opening up?
It wasn't because I committed myself to being of service to people through counseling, right? Mentoring, counseling, things like that. And so even though it felt a little weird at first, it also kind of confirmed to me that this is what I need to be doing. This is where I'm going to get my start, right?
Mhm.
And so I would use my tutoring sessions as I'm helping guys with reading and math and science toward their education, and I'm using those as kind of life coaching sessions as well, talking to
Mhm.
guys about what they plan on doing when they get out of here, how they're going to go back to their old neighborhood, but put boundaries up and keep their old buddies from coming around and wanting to hang out and do things. Using my own story about having been to prison already and getting
Mhm.
out and thinking that I could hang out with certain guys, but
Mhm.
not drink or not go do this or not go do that. And it's just, and so I'm kind of warning them about these things and talking to them about life. And so just
Mhm.
kind of that mentorship was also, kind of reaffirming to me that this is absolutely the work I need to be doing. And I was getting a great response from the young guys, because they didn't
Mhm.
talk to anybody else about these vulnerabilities and things like that, but they would talk to me about it. So that
Awesome.
was that was an awesome thing, man.
Let's take a quick break here and look at we got a comment coming in. And there's Dylan.
Hey, Alex Major NVBY says, I always wondered what happened to the driver in my sister's accident. I'm so lucky that I didn't harm anyone with my 2 DUIs. Damn.
Yeah.
Really, really powerful stuff there, Alexander. Thank you for sharing, and
Yeah, thanks for opening up.
incredibly pertinent and important to this topic right now. And I guess I have my own little comments as well. Just hearing a lot of your story, Martin, is to be in thanks and gratitude to you. You know, I've been one of those young men on the wrong path, doing these things and whatnot, and it's so important to have that older role model. It's so crucial. It's almost sometimes life-changing to see an older male that looks like you, thinks like you, has maybe a similar background to be walking that path. So my own comment in this is a sense of gratitude and thankfulness for you stepping into that space and masculinity and making it more positive.
And
Absolutely. Thank you, man.
For anyone who doesn't know why Donna's not sitting there tonight, Dylan's stepping in for us. We have our son's going to camp this summer camp, and Donna had to take him, and Dylan more than gratefully stepped up to fill Donna's shoes for tonight. So that's my friend Dylan.
Hi, and
Doing a
thanks
great
for
job,
having
by
me
the way,
down.
Dylan. Absolutely.
Heck of a job, Dylan. Heck of a job.
Oh, you guys. Let's get back to Martin, though. Let's get back to the content.
So, Martin, you have a master's degree and another degree on top of that. How long did that take you in prison?
So I started the journey of my education in 2005 when I got to state prison, and I didn't get my master's until 2016. So what is that, 11 years?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So a little longer than the average person.
Was there barriers because you were incarcerated, or did you have the same access as someone on the outside would have had?
So we have no internet access whatsoever.
Oy.
So I have an amazing fiance that I met who actually did 16 of the 17 and a half years with me. And she's the one who actually, she just incredible. So we live together today. I live in Pennsylvania because of her, even though I'm from Oregon.
You met her in prison?
Yes, I was on a pen pal website. Yeah. And yeah, I know the old cliche, right?
My man.
And but man, just incredible, just incredible. So she was the one who actually she did all the footwork, right? She had to call the universities, get me enrolled as a student, order my classes, order my exams, order my books from Amazon, have everything sent into the prison. I mean, just everything that needed to be done to be corresponded with to the college, she had to do on my behalf. And so just incredible. She's the reason why I have 2 published books today. You know, just did everything I could have asked and a lot more.
Mm-hmm. We've got one more comment coming in here from my friend Onyx.
Onyx says, bless you, Martin. From a spiritual perspective, everything happens for a reason. It wasn't for nothing. Your journey and the beautiful soul was and is divinely guided by the highest God. Asai? I don't know about that last word and how to pronounce it, but still a beautiful message from Onyx. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Onyx. No, I agree that things don't happen by happenstance. My spirituality and that growth and really that buy-in, as you said, right? Mm-hmm. That really took root because I can tell you with the things that I was able to accomplish, and I'm a firm believer in the laws of attraction. What you manifest, or I'm sorry, what you project, what you ruminate on, what you meditate on is what is going to be manifested in your life. And so I literally, as I was going throughout this prison sentence and things like that, and envisioning where I wanted my career to be and what I wanted to be doing and getting into public speaking, right? I would literally visualize them walking around the track, visualize myself in front of large audiences, telling my story, spreading awareness, having people come up to me and talk about, you know, their own stories and how my story relates to them, and just having it be this cathartic, healing, powerful process. Mm-hmm. And that is exactly what is happening today. It is beyond my wildest dreams what I've been able to do since I've been out. And man, it's just been phenomenal. And that didn't happen just because, right?
So you found, like you mentioned meditation there. Is that something you found when you were incarcerated, or was that something you did before too?
So My meditation is me kind of, so I'm very much an introvert. Even though I do public speaking and things like that, I'm very much an introvert.
I hear that a
And
lot.
so when I meditate, so to speak, it's like me kind of spending time with myself and kind of just like almost becoming obsessed
Hmm.
with whatever it is that I'm wanting to see happen in my life, right? If it's to, have a nice house, if it's to have great friends, if it's to be able to, go to this island or go to here or go there or have certain career success or things like that, like I just become almost obsessed with it, right? Where
Hmm.
I'm meditating on that, and
Hmm.
and I'm believing that that's going to happen, and it may seem totally impossible to anybody around me, but it's
Hmm.
not to me. Like it's
Hmm.
not to me, man. And so
I feel that.
and so
I feel that.
I just kind of, man, I become one with whatever that vision is, man, and
Mhm.
I won't let go of it, and
Yeah.
things have worked out pretty good.
Tell us about getting out of prison.
It
Like, were you
was like
scared?
walking onto Mars.
Were you scared?
I was very much overwhelmed. I
Yeah.
was very much overstimulated because,
Hmm.
as you can imagine, in prison, everything is gray and drab and no color. And like you get out and like you go into a grocery store and it's like ads and colors and stimuli and little kids running around
Huh.
and beeps and bro, it was crazy, man.
You kind of
Like it
opened
was
my
crazy.
mind there. You kind of opened my mind there a
Like
little bit. I never considered the colors of a grocery store to be something that would stand out to someone who's been incarcerated.
it
That's
is so
something.
bright and it's like colors everywhere. And I'll tell you, this was a moment for me. So I go to the grocery store for the first time with my fiance because she came to spend the first 3 weeks with me. Thank God, to show me how to use an iPhone and show me how to use Bluetooth and all this crap that I had never known.
Yeah.
Um, and so I remember hearing a baby crying in the store. And of course, the baby's just going off, and people were looking around like, just getting annoyed. You can see they're getting annoyed that this baby is crying their head off.
Hmm.
And for me, it was such a welcome sound because I realized that I hadn't heard that sound live in 17 and a half years.
Wow.
And it was just like,
New
wow,
level.
that's the sound of freedom.
New level of
Maybe
gratitude.
it may be annoying as hell to everybody else, but
Uh
it
huh.
is such a beautiful sound to me in this moment.
Is it still a beautiful sound to this day now, or are you getting kind of
It,
annoyed?
it, it is not quite as beautiful.
Yeah.
but but honestly, I'll tell you what, I was in the airport a couple weeks ago, going to a speaking engagement. I'm stranded in Newark, New Jersey,
Hmm.
and so I missed my flight, and I got to stay in the airport. I got to wait in the line for 3.5 hours for customer service and get rebooked. And I'm angry, and I'm like, oh, this I can't believe this is happening. And then I had a moment, and I said, wait, just 2 years ago, I
Hmm.
was in a prison cell wishing that I could be stuck in an airport and that be the worst problem in my life in this moment.
Hmm.
Seriously.
Yeah.
Like I said, like there's so many guys, and I keep in contact with so many guys right now, guys that I built relationships with. And they say, I tell them about what's going, oh man, I had this happen. They say, oh man, champagne problems, free world problems, must be nice.
First
And
world
I'm like, you know
problems.
what?
Yeah.
That's right. That's right, man. And it
Yeah.
just instantly I snapped out of it, and I'm like, man, this is not a problem. This is an inconvenience. This is not a
Hmm.
problem. They
Hmm.
have problems in prison. Those are
Hmm.
problems.
Well, and I can relate even to what happened this evening when we came out of the commercial there and you were gone, Like there was a time where I was like in a dumpster, man. Like I was like scraping cans and doing all the things and today I get stressed out when the guest on my live streaming talk show disappears for a minute. Like come on, man. Like come on, find some
Yeah,
gratitude in where we're at, you know what I mean?
this
So,
is true. This is
yeah,
true,
man.
man.
Yeah,
Perspective. It's all about perspective.
it's beautiful. So,
So,
did
yeah.
you get into public speaking right away? Like, what did your journey look like into service after you'd gotten out?
So, yeah. So it started while I was in. So in 2015, so I still had six and a half years left, and they started a DUI victim impact panel within the prison. So they would bring in somebody from the outside who had lost a loved one to a DUI driver. And they're
Mhm.
sitting in a room of 50 inmates in a circle. And everybody's there voluntarily because it's just a program that they created, nothing mandatory. And so they would tell their story, just a gut-wrenching story of how they lost a daughter or a husband or a wife or a parent or grandparent. And then one of us on the inside would tell our story about how we perpetrated this crime. And man, there was so much just just healing energy in those rooms. Like you had this one lady come in. Somebody had killed her daughter like 18 years prior. Her daughter was on a motorcycle. She was beautiful, just turned 18, was going to go into the Navy, had an amazing career ahead of her. And this guy kills her. She was on her motorcycle. He never apologized. He didn't take responsibility. I think he got maybe 3 or 4 years at the time because the laws were much different. And she
Mhm.
never got an apology from this guy. And that's all she wanted, right? So she's got a hardened heart, and she's coming into a prison. So now she gets to tell these prisoners, right, what she hopes she could have told
Okay.
that guy.
Okay.
So there's that, right?
Yeah.
And then another guy, my buddy, he gets out in a couple years. He's been down 23 years, but he tells his story about how he killed one person and injured 4 people in a DUI crash.
Mhm.
But before he does all that, he looks to her and he apologizes for what this guy did to her and her family all those years ago. And he said, I know that I'm not that guy, but like I am sorry, right? I'm so
Mhm.
sorry that this happened to your family. And please accept my apology on his behalf and blah, blah, blah. And like at the end of his speech, like that lady was in so like just a waterfall coming out. And she stood up and she said, I carry so much pain and hatred toward this guy for all these years. And even though you're not that guy who did this to my daughter, like I
Mhm.
feel that was the apology that I've been waiting for, right? Coming from you and,
Yeah.
and seeing all you men in this room who could have been him, right?
Mhm.
And she said, and man, she came in 2 or 3 times after that. Her whole demeanor was lighter, and it was just, man, it was so much healing. So in that space, in that program, is when I knew that I was going to go beyond being a counselor, and I was going to start to tell my story and get my message out there. And so since I've been out, I immediately spoke at a couple panels from volunteers who had come into the prison that I had met, and they allowed me to come speak at their panels in Oregon. And then I started, I created my website, and I had my YouTube video. It's got like I think about 30,000 views. It
Mhm.
was showed all throughout the country during the pandemic when all the panels shut down. They had to have online content.
Yeah.
So like I get emails even today from people in California, Illinois, Florida, Michigan saying that they were required to watch my story at this panel or at this outpatient program or this
Mhm.
intensive outpatient program, or this high school kid reached out and said, "Oh, my health class is showing your video. Thank you for sharing." Like just all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And it's opened up a lot of opportunities for me to speak at conferences and high schools. I'm doing a 5 college tour in New York in September. I speak at highway safety classes. I speak remotely. I speak in person. It's just phenomenal, man. I'm so
Mhm.
blessed. But you know what? When people say, "Man, can you believe like it's happened for you?" And I did it myself. I don't have an agent. I don't have a manager. I don't have a
Yeah.
publicist. Like I literally like blast out emails and then
Mhm.
wait to hear back. And then when I go speak, I hand out my cards. People come up to me afterward. Like it's just this whole organic thing.
Mhm.
But I knew I was gonna be doing this work. And I knew that it was gonna, once it like caught fire, it was gonna be successful. And
Yeah.
man, it's just amazing.
Did you have you ever had an opportunity to meet with or communicate with your victim's family?
That's a great question. So for 16 of the 17 and a half years, I hadn't heard of anything from anybody, right?
Mhm.
So I'm in my cell, and it's at the outset of the pandemic. So March of 2020, I'm in my cell, and I get a letter, little tiny little letter, and I see the name on the outside, and I don't know who this person is, but I know that last name.
Mhm.
So now my heart is in my stomach because I don't know what is going to be in this letter. And I
Mhm.
take it out, and it's three short paragraphs on a little yellow notepad of paper. And she says, "Hi, my name is blah blah blah. My mom was blah blah blah. And then she immediately goes into saying, I can't help but to think about you guys during this pandemic and this really tough time. And it must be so hard in there. And please let me know if I can send you toilet paper or food or money or anything to like make things a little easier for you. Like, she didn't mention anything about the crash. She didn't mention anything about how this had affected, her and her family over the nothing. Like, she's only concerned about my well-being during the height of this pandemic. And like,
Wow.
just blew me away.
How?
I mean, just absolutely blew me away. So I didn't know how to respond to that.
Yeah.
Right. So I sit with it for about 3 days. And then I start to craft my response. And I wrote 6 pages front and back. Right. Because it was imperative that I let her know everything that I had done throughout my incarceration to honor what I said I was going to do at sentencing 16 years prior.
And they were there when you made that vow?
They were absolutely there when I
Okay.
made that vow that I was going to spend the rest of my life making this my mission and my purpose. And so I needed her to know that I wasn't saying what sounded good for the cameras or the judge or the courtroom or like, this is who I am. This is going to be me for the rest of my life. And so I told her everything I had done to hopefully honor her mom, what she was doing when she passed away. And she wrote me back, man. And she said, Martin, she said, this is the best outcome my family and I could have hoped for. She said, we're so thankful that you have stayed true to what you said you were going to do. She said, I'm going to share this letter with my family and like, God bless you. And like, it was just an amazing thing. And I'll tell you, so we exchanged a few letters. I haven't heard from her since then. And I can't now because, I'm on supervision and you can't reach out to the victims' families and all that. Totally understandable. But if I never hear from her again, like, I feel like I got what I needed. And frankly, I didn't even know that I needed it at the time. But when I heard those words and that validation, like, I knew that I needed that, man.
Mm-hmm. And obvious, and I think the family, because I'm taken back to when you were talking about how the woman never got an apology for the death of her daughter. Right. And I'm thinking about how you were able to open that line of communication, both probably at sentencing. I can imagine there was probably an amend offered at sentencing. Am I safe to assume that? So, but then to follow through with that 16 years later with this very meaningful letter and actually having gone through with it, I'm sure that brought the family healing, surely, especially with the nature of the way that your victims lived their life, that their legacy is continuing. So
absolutely.
That's beautiful.
Absolutely, man.
Okay, man. I think we're at the end here. Is there anything? Oh, and hang on. We've got a clip from next week's guest coming up here, so don't jump off just yet. Martin, is there anything that you'd like to close with?
I just want to say that for anybody who might be struggling with drugs and/or alcohol, there is a toll-free line that you can reach out to. 3 simple digits, 988. No matter where you are, you can reach out 24/7.
That's the U.S.
I take calls on some of those in the U.S. We actually get some Canadian people that call as well.
Okay.
But we will find resources in their area if we can and kind of refer them there. But in the U.S., anybody can reach out and we'll get you connected to resources in your area. If you're struggling in the moment, we will sit with you for however long it takes just to empathize and validate and give you that safe space to share. And, you're talking to people with lived experience who answer these calls. And so please, please, please do reach out. You do not have to try to do this alone. None of us can do it alone. We need to do it in community. We don't do recovery in isolation. We do it in community, and there is a huge community out there. Just reach out, and you'll definitely be met with that care and compassion.
Awesome. Okay, thanks so much, Martin, for joining us this evening. Dylan, thank you so much for manning the keys tonight, watching the chat, keeping it safe. If you're getting something out of this, please give it a like. Give this episode a like. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. Turn on notifications so you don't miss a thing. Thanks so much, everyone, for watching. We'll see you next week. Take care.
I was picked up late at night and made to drive myself at gunpoint across Edmonton to a trap house where they held me for 3 days. I was beaten and tortured. I was basically under the impression I was going to be hacked up into bits and thrown off the Bow Valley Bridge. After the third day, they cut me loose, and I then kind of had a concrete plan in place of what I wanted to do differently with my life. I wanted sobriety at this point without a near-death experience or the kidnapping.